The Zenthari Intergalactic Academy was no ordinary institution. Suspended above a gas giant and cloaked in artificial gravity, it welcomed only the most exceptional students from across the known galaxy. Minds so sharp they could rival entire quantum networks, species so rare their homeworlds were whispers in academic texts. But even here, one species carried a weight that bent the mood of entire lecture halls: humans. Virak, of the Telari, an insectoid race known for intellectual rigor and cultural restraint, found his thorax tightening with anticipation as he floated toward Biohall 3. Today's class wasn't special on the schedule, but everyone in his dorm was buzzing with barely restrained energy. A new transfer had been listed under the attendance protocol, one marked simply as H. Sapiens Terran, a Deathworlder. The term was not used lightly. Deathworlds were a classification for planets so hostile, most life forms wouldn't survive past a day. Earth sat at the top percentile. Toxic flora, carnivorous fauna, shifting biomes, viral complexity, plate tectonics, unstable weather, active predators, and worst of all, sentient bipeds that had evolved to endure it all. Legends around humans were so saturated with drama that even rational beings like Virak had to suppress the instinctive shiver they caused. The stories weren't just about survival. They were about adaptation through pain, progress through catastrophe, and dominance without reason. He arrived early, settling into the upper tier of the semi-spherical classroom. The other students filtered in: Yovan from the liquid phase Cyrilin, Yek from the crystalline Fermari, Charn of the Delvori, and conversations sparked with tension. No one even pretended to study. The murmurs were all the same. Have you seen it yet? Is it wearing armor? Do they really only sleep 4 hours? Why would one enroll in this class? Biohazards and Live Ecosystems, a third cycle elective notorious for featuring living specimens, often with unpredictable consequences. The last incident involved a Rivari spore beast that emitted airborne hallucinogens when startled. A Delvori student had danced for 6 hours before collapsing from dehydration. And that was just a level 3 threat. Today was supposed to be a lecture on containment protocols. But the atmosphere said otherwise. Then the door opened. The sound was unremarkable, just the shift of the pressurized seal, but the effect was immediate. Conversation halted. A single figure stepped into the amphitheater. 2 legs, upright posture, oxygen-based respiration unit on her back, black uniform with no insignia. Medium height. Pale skin. Dark eyes. Short-cut hair. No expression. She moved with unhurried, balanced steps, as though she wasn't entering a room full of students who had discussed her kind like living myths. Her gaze swept across the tiers of alien faces, stopping on none but missing nothing. No words. No gesture. Just quiet presence. Virak couldn't explain the sensation. Something about her presence felt inherently contradictory. Small, soft, and yet incredibly heavy, like her being carried a density not measured in mass. His neural nodes activated defensive clusters unconsciously. Beside him, Charn whispered. They let it in without an escort. The human took a seat near the center console, beside the digital vivarium where various microorganisms were displayed on multispectrum interfaces. The chair barely creaked. She folded her hands. Still, no words. Not even to the instructor. Professor Ekarin arrived shortly after. The Formari's translucent structure pulsed faintly with tension, unusual for its kind. Class, it began, voice layered in synthetic harmonics. Before we begin, I must make an announcement regarding next week's session. The projection behind it shifted, revealing a sleek data model of a quadrupedal creature with bone-scythed limbs and exoskeletal armor. The feed auto-scrolled down to its classification, Zeroth Prime Predator. Class, Level 7 Threat. Status, Live Specimen, ****. A collective ripple of disbelief moved through the room. The Academy has granted clearance for live demonstration. Ekarin continued. Students will observe advanced predator behavior management. Safety protocols will be maximized. Someone in the back whispered. Level 7? Are they mad? Charn spoke louder than necessary. This is reckless. No species here has survived even simulated encounters. The professor tilted slightly, its crystalline limbs folding. The demonstration will be led by Dr. Elara Miles, recently transferred from Terran Xenobiology Command. She has requested no synthetic assistance. All eyes turned toward the human. She didn't move, didn't smile, didn't nod. She just looked at the model of the predator with something that wasn't quite curiosity. More like familiarity. No one dared speak further. The class resumed, but the content went unprocessed. Virak sat frozen, watching this quiet human who had volunteered to enter a cage with a creature that melted armor and killed in seconds. The myths had been wrong in one way. Humans weren't loud. They didn't roar or threaten or posture. They just walked in like they belong. The dormitory air buzzed with speculation. Virak had barely entered when Charn confronted him, antennae twitching. You saw it. The Deathworlder. Was it armed? The question wasn't sarcasm. It was genuine concern dressed as curiosity. No one here truly knew what to expect. The human had been there an entire class, silent, unassuming, yet the room had felt as if something dangerous was coiled and watching. Later that night, the lounge filled with more voices, more questions, and more fear disguised as interest. Jovan, translucent and flowing in a nutrient tank, displayed 3 archived security incidents involving humans on other space stations. One had survived a hull breach by sealing a gash in their own suit with synthetic fiber and skin cells. Another had fought off a vacuum squid barehanded while protecting a younger crew. The last had deactivated a thermal detonation by using nothing but a multi-tool and instinct. None of them were soldiers. Just civilians. Survivors. Charn shook his cranial ridge. I still don't buy it. Propaganda. Romanticized exaggeration. They want us to believe they're special. They are, muttered Virak, surprising even himself. Yek, whose species communicated through reflective pulse patterns, projected a feed showing Earth's classification logs. Temperature fluctuations of over 40 degrees within cycles. Invasive species count beyond manageable limits. Viral mutation rates higher than known plague worlds. Virak noted the commentary beneath the data. Planet not recommended for diplomatic visits without full Class 5 hazard protection. They live there permanently, Jovan added. No suits. No shielding. That fact sat heavily among them. Every species here needed augmentation to survive their own environments. Earthlings had adapted naturally. Not through avoidance, but endurance. They didn't engineer comfort, they adapted to chaos. Virak searched historical footage of Earth. Primitive tribes, space colonists, disaster zones, Antarctic research units. The pattern repeated itself, people falling, bleeding, breaking, and getting up again. Fear never seemed to paralyze them. It honed them. The Telari had always valued control, logic, and minimal risk. But the human was not reckless. Her quiet entry, the way she scanned the room, there was calculation in it. Observation. A complete threat assessment conducted in silence. Predators used that silence. Not to announce, but to prepare. It wasn't fear he felt. Not entirely. It was recognition. Later, in a systems ethics seminar, Professor Trivai posed a hypothetical. If a predator is intelligent and restrained, is it still dangerous? No one responded directly, but Charn glanced at Virak. Everyone was thinking it. The human wasn't passive. She was choosing stillness. That was worse. A creature that acted without rage or impulse was more dangerous than one driven by instinct. More rumors surfaced. Elara Miles had completed a survival course on Gliese 47, a rogue moon that orbited nothing, frozen in total night. 2 of her instructors had quit mid-training. She'd completed it solo. She had once mediated a hostage standoff on a trade station, unarmed, talking down a species known to eat their own kind when stressed. She wasn't a soldier, diplomat, or academic in the traditional sense. She was something in between. Someone who operated in the gaps. What does she want? Charn asked. Why take this class? Why study predators? What's the point? Because she understands them, Virak said. Because humans are one. No one argued. By the next morning, the campus net swarmed with theories. Some said she was a test subject. Others believed she was here to evaluate them, not the other way around. An observer sent by Earth's Defense Council. A silent warning. A knife in a velvet case. And yet Virak couldn't shake a growing certainty. The human wasn't posturing. She wasn't here to impress or intimidate. She had no need to. She knew what she was. Everyone else was catching up. The upcoming live Predator session was now more than a lesson, it was a reckoning. The class had been designed to push species into managing terror in real time. But for Alara, it would likely be routine. She came from a world where the line between living and dying was crossed daily. If she had volunteered, she wasn't making a statement. She was simply continuing what came naturally. By now, every student in the academy knew her name. Alara Miles? Human. Deathworlder. No one laughed at the myths anymore. Every seat was taken. Some students stood along the walls, others perched on elevated supports, eyes locked on the containment area. A tension hung in the air that no filtration system could cleanse. The Zeroth Prime Predator had arrived, and it was worse than anyone expected. Its limbs were jagged, armored, twitching with rapid muscle spasms. Acidic vapor hissed from glandular vents along its thorax. The containment field shimmered, struggling to keep up with the biochemical fluctuations. It circled constantly, testing for weaknesses. 3 drones had already been corroded by proximity, not contact. The students watched with rigid posture, calculating odds of survival in case of breach. No one spoke. The professor's voice cracked slightly despite its synthesized clarity. Today's demonstration will focus on behavioral override and predator containment techniques under active threat. Protocols were reviewed. Emergency exits lit. Shields primed. Then, Dr. Alara Miles stepped forward. No special suit. No shielding. Just gloves and a standard control band. Her expression never changed. Not arrogance. Not detachment. Focus, precise and surgical. She approached the holding field and entered the manual override sequence. Silence gripped the room tighter than any command could. The force field dropped. The creature stopped pacing. It turned. 8 eyes locked onto her. Acid hissed against the floor. Then it moved. Fast. Aggressive. Unpredictable. Alara didn't flinch. She shifted, just once, body angled, stance low, not defensive, but firm. The creature paused mid-lunge. Snarled. She remained still. No weapon drawn. No step taken. It advanced slowly now, sensing something it didn't recognize. Her body language wasn't prey. It wasn't predator either. It was foreign. It disrupted the pattern. She took one measured step forward. The class collectively inhaled. The predator shrieked, claws striking the floor. Alara raised a hand. No words. No movement beyond the deliberate gesture. The beast froze again. It tasted the air. Its breathing slowed. She moved again, slower this time. Her palm remained up. Her voice came, low and steady. You're not hunting. Not here. Not now. It tilted its head. The acid vents stopped hissing. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the impossible occurred. The predator backed up. She lowered her hand. Walked in a slow arc, eyes never leaving its form. It matched her pacing, mirroring her turns without aggression. She crouched. Not submission, invitation. The creature took 2 steps, then sat. Sat and stayed. Gasps broke the silence. The professor's posture shifted from disbelief to stunned silence. Every student leaned forward, unable to reconcile what they were seeing. This wasn't dominance. It wasn't fear. It was understanding. She had read its instincts, responded without threat or panic. She hadn't broken it. She had communicated. She stood again and approached. The predator's muscles coiled, but didn't strike. She extended a hand. It sniffed, then lowered its head. Contact. The moment passed. She stepped away. No applause. No dramatics. Just silence and awe. She turned to the class. You study threat levels, biological responses, chemical triggers. You build models. That's not how we learned. Her voice remained calm, even. On Earth, we didn't get to avoid predators. We learned their patterns. We tracked their habits. We survived by understanding what wanted to kill us, not by fearing it. Eyes followed her as she walked back to the observation console. Taming isn't about force. It's about clarity. You give the beast no reason to act. No confusion. No panic. Just presence. We didn't evolve to be stronger than our threats. We evolved to be impossible to predict. And that's what kept us alive. The containment field reactivated. The predator paced once, then lay down. Dr. Miles sat. Quiet. As if nothing had happened. No questions followed. No one raised a hand. The room remained silent until dismissal. And even then, the students left slowly, like exiting a temple. In under 5 minutes, without tools, weapons, or tech enhancements, a human had stared down a creature that dismembered armored drones, and made it obey. No speeches. No performance. Just a demonstration of what it meant to come from a world where survival wasn't an art. It was a requirement. The next day, silence followed Alara wherever she went. Not the silence of dismissal or avoidance, but one charged with awareness. Conversation stopped the moment she passed, not out of rudeness but reverence. Not a single being in the academy could unsee what she had done. It wasn't bravado. It wasn't calculated showmanship. It was control in its purest form, quiet, absolute, and rooted in something beyond comprehension for most species in attendance. Virak found himself replaying the sequence in his mind, analyzing the predator's body language, the shift in aggression, the moment of submission. Nothing in the databases explained it. No existing xenopsychological model accounted for a human presence altering a Class 7 predator's behavior without physical deterrence. There had been no sedatives. No neural dampeners. Only tone, posture, and attention. Professor Ekaran released the demonstration footage for academic review. By mid-cycle, it had gone system-wide. Independent analysts tried to quantify the interaction. Frame-by-frame assessments were published, each attempting to identify what triggered the predator's behavioral shift. None succeeded. There was no data point, no measurable change, no spike in emitted pheromones or neural inhibitors. It had simply chosen not to attack. That disturbed the analysts more than the event itself. Alara never commented. She didn't engage in discussion. She attended her courses, took notes, completed assignments, and left before questions could gather around her. Some assumed it was secrecy. Others suspected strategic silence. Virak disagreed. He sensed something far simpler. She wasn't interested in recognition. She had nothing to prove. Across campus, a shift in tone took root. For the first time, students weren't comparing species by their intellectual ratings or adaptive scores. They were reconsidering the meaning of capability. For Mari, Cyrilin, Delvori, species long considered paragons of specialized excellence, had all struggled with creatures below level 7. Alara had controlled one with nothing more than presence. Not through superior strength or exotic technology. Just refined instinct shaped by generations of life on a world designed to break the weak. Charn was less vocal now. No more sarcastic commentary or speculative theories. He'd watched the playback 4 times without a word. The bravado had faded, replaced by contemplation. She didn't hesitate. He finally said during an interspecies ethics discussion. That was the worst part. She wasn't even gauging risk. She already understood it. Yek chimed in via reflective transmission. Her kind survived without having to evolve physical dominance. They shaped behavior instead of imposing it. It's not strategy, Virak added quietly. It's inheritance. A new kind of study began, unofficial, but widespread. Not about predator species or threat classifications, but about humans. Students gathered fragments of Terran history. Wildfires survived. Cities rebuilt. Epidemics endured. Wars with no clear logic, yet brutal tenacity. They read about endurance events, solo ocean crossings, Arctic explorations, cave rescues. No single triumph explained their capacity, but the volume did. Everything pointed to one conclusion: humans didn't fear the edge. They evolved there. Instructors took note too. Discussions shifted. Models updated. Lesson plans began referencing human behavioral variances as variables, not anomalies. A Terran inclusion clause was added to some lab modules, warning students that existing assumptions might not apply. The system had begun adapting to her, not the other way around. Elara still said little. She observed. She listened. She was present, always, but never invasive. It was as if she didn't require attention because she'd already resolved her place in the hierarchy, and it wasn't above others, but outside of their framework entirely. She wasn't competing. She wasn't reacting. She was navigating on her own terms. One night, Virak passed her in the observation deck. She sat alone, staring out at the planet below, features calm, unreadable. He hesitated, then asked, "Were you afraid?" She didn't look at him. "No." "Why not?" Her voice was soft, neutral. "Fear is useful. But it doesn't get to drive." He didn't press further. There was no need. The Academy had built its prestige on intellect, precision, and collaboration. But in a single day, one human had redefined the boundaries of what survival looked like, not through innovation, but through something older and far more unsettling. Innate, unshakable resilience. Final evaluations arrived, signaling the end of term. Instructors issued assessments, and peer reviews began circulating. Most students treated the process with formality, an expected step before advancement. But this cycle felt different. The incident with the predator hadn't faded. It had become a fixed point in institutional memory, and Elara Miles was now the axis around which every discussion spun. Official transcripts showed nothing extraordinary. Her marks were strong but not anomalous. She hadn't outperformed in simulations or scored highest in theoretical tests. And yet, no instructor questioned her placement. They knew performance on paper couldn't measure what she'd already proven. Virak sat with his cohort during closing review. The council discussed decision-making under duress, command presence, response calibration. But each of those terms now felt inadequate. What Elara had demonstrated didn't fit any metric. It wasn't leadership in the way they taught it. It was something more instinctual, rooted deeper than training. They weren't just reviewing an event, they were recalibrating definitions. She received no award, no commendation, nothing ceremonial. But her presence alone had altered the system's architecture. Students now referenced Miles' protocol, in jokes that weren't entirely jokes. If a procedure failed, someone would inevitably say, "Try the human method." It meant, stop thinking like a technician, start thinking like a survivor. Outside academic circles, attention had grown. Interplanetary defense consultants requested anonymized footage. Human behavior models were now being tagged as unstable advantage vectors. Not because they were erratic, but because no predictive algorithm could consistently chart their actions. Elara's handling of the predator was already being tested in military think tanks for integration into extreme threat scenarios. Within the Academy, a subtle shift in hierarchy occurred. Not enforced, not spoken, but present. The species once considered dominant in applied survival studies deferred to her without discussion. In debates, her silence carried more influence than most arguments. She didn't interrupt. She didn't need to. Her perspective had already shaped the outcome before the first word was spoken. At one point, the ethics chair asked her privately to record a reflection for the Academy archives. She declined. Not out of defiance, but disinterest. It wasn't extraordinary, she told them. It was necessary. She didn't linger for farewells. On the last day, she left the same way she'd arrived, quietly, without ceremony. No final lecture. No announcement. Just absence. And yet, her departure felt heavier than any speech would have. Her influence remained, not as inspiration, but as a recalibrated standard. Not everyone admired her. Some resented the disruption. Others questioned whether such instincts belonged in structured institutions. But none denied the impact. For weeks afterward, new modules were tested. Instructors revised their hazard engagement coursework. Non-escalatory presence techniques became a term of study. Elara's actions had forced a return to fundamentals: threat recognition, emotional control, unspoken dominance hierarchies. The entire pedagogical framework now included the concept of preemptive behavioral neutralization, not through suppression, but through sovereign calm. Students began to train differently. Less reliance on tech. More focus on baseline awareness. Communication drills stripped down to body language and tone. Resilience simulations grew more brutal, mimicking conditions found on Earth. Not because it was a death world, but because it produced minds that could override instinct through will alone. Her legacy was not one of fear. It was of inevitability. A human had arrived, seen what others feared, and responded without posturing, panic, or hesitation. That steadiness was now the aspirational model. Not conquest. Not calculation. Just presence sharpened by adversity. Months later, Virak came across a new intake of students being briefed on psychological tolerance during encounters with apex threats. The instructor pulled up a holographic image, a frame from the demonstration. The moment Elara stood before the predator, hand raised, unflinching. "This," the instructor said, "is not about bravery. It's about choice. You can't teach this. You adapt to it, or you don't." Elara Miles was gone. But the academy she left behind no longer functioned by the same rules. Not because she had demanded change. Because she made it impossible to ignore.